When a woman decides to stop being endlessly available, she begins to reclaim her life in a way that shifts everything around her. Too often, women are taught to put others before themselves, to always be accessible, to always say yes. But when she chooses boundaries, she is saying, my time, my energy, my heart, they are valuable. This simple but powerful act transforms her relationships, her sense of self-worth, and how others treat her. It's not about shutting people out, but about creating space for respect, balance, and authenticity. Availability is often mistaken for love or loyalty, but it can quickly become a cycle of self-sacrifice that leaves a woman drained. When she stops making herself constantly accessible, the world around her learns to adjust. Friends, family, and partners begin to realize that her presence is a privilege, not a guarantee. This change forces others to value her contributions more deeply. It also allows her to invest in her own growth, passions, and inner peace. The shift is not only external, it is internal, giving her back a sense of power she may have lost. There is a quiet revolution that begins when a woman stops being available on demand. She redefines what love, connection, and care look like. By creating boundaries, she teaches others to respect them. By saying no, she makes her yes more meaningful. By withdrawing from constant availability, she invites healthier dynamics into her life. This transformation does not make her cold or distant. It makes her authentic. Everything changes because she no longer operates from fear of losing people, but from confidence in her own worth. The act of no longer being constantly available is not about rejection. It's about self-respect. When a woman shifts her focus from people pleasing to self-care, her relationships undergo a natural transformation. Those who genuinely value her will rise to meet her boundaries, while those who only took advantage of her availability may fall away. In this way, her world realigns itself, leaving her surrounded by those who honor her strength. Everything changes because she is no longer defined by her availability, but by her authenticity and courage to live on her own terms. When a woman stops being available, she stops living on everyone else's timetable and starts living on her own. This is a radical act of courage. It shifts her energy away from overextending herself into spaces that don't serve her and toward the places where her spirit can thrive. She learns to say no without guilt, to rest without apology, and to love without losing herself. This change ripples outward. Her confidence grows, her relationships strengthen, and her life becomes more aligned with who she truly is. Everything changes because she does. When a woman decides to stop being endlessly available, she begins to reclaim her life in a way that shifts everything around her. Too often, women are conditioned from a very early age to put others first, to say yes when they want to say no, to answer calls even when they are exhausted, to agree to obligations that drain them, and to always be accessible in relationships, friendships, families, and workplaces. This cultural expectation is so deeply ingrained that many women don't even realize how much it shapes their choices, until one day they wake up and realize that their identity has become entangled with their availability. The truth is, availability is often mistaken for love, loyalty, or kindness, but in reality, being endlessly available can rob a woman of her time, energy, and emotional freedom. When she finally decides to shift this pattern, everything around her changes. Her relationships, her self-image, and the way people treat her. The first and perhaps most profound change happens internally. A woman who has spent years being constantly available often struggles with guilt at the thought of saying no. She worries she might disappoint others or be labeled as selfish. But when she finally takes that courageous first step and chooses herself over someone else's demand, she experiences an unfamiliar but liberating sense of control. It's not that she stops caring for others. It's that she begins caring for herself with equal importance. That balance alters her sense of identity. she realizes that she is not defined by how much she gives away, but by the values she holds, the boundaries she sets, and the self-respect she cultivates. This new awareness changes how she walks into a room, how she speaks, and how she carries herself. People notice it, even if they can't put it into words. Externally, her relationships are forced to adjust. For years, people may have been accustomed to her saying yes, to her dropping everything at a moment's notice, to her sacrificing her plans for their convenience. When she changes that dynamic, some may resist. Friends may complain, partners may question, and coworkers may push back. But the shift is not about pleasing everyone. It's about teaching them that her time and energy are valuable. Those who genuinely care will eventually learn to respect her boundaries, while those who only valued her availability will either drift away or reveal their true intentions. Though this pruning process can feel painful at first, it ultimately leaves her surrounded by healthier and more authentic connections. This change also has a ripple effect on her energy. A woman who is constantly available often runs on empty. She gives and gives until she has nothing left for herself, and the result is exhaustion, resentment, or even burnout. When she finally chooses to limit her availability, she begins to replenish her energy. She has more time for self-care, hobbies, rest, and personal growth. Her creativity may return, her health may improve, and her overall joy in life begins to rise. This replenished energy allows her to show up in her relationships and responsibilities with more presence, more love, and more strength, but this time on her own terms. Everything changes because she is no longer pouring from an empty cup. There is also a psychological empowerment that comes with this decision. For too long, many women have felt that saying no or being less available will make them less likable, less loved, or even abandoned. But as she practices boundaries, she realizes that the opposite is true. Her no becomes a declaration of self-worth, and her yes becomes more meaningful because it is intentional rather than obligatory. People begin to take her more seriously. They learn that her time is not endless and that her presence is not to be taken for granted. This subtle shift in perception elevates her in the eyes of others, but more importantly, it elevates her in her own eyes. She begins to trust herself more, value herself more, and live more authentically. When a woman stops being endlessly available, she also opens the door to new opportunities. Availability can often trap women in repetitive cycles, always being the reliable one, the helper, the fixer. But when she breaks free from this pattern, she creates space for other things to enter her life. That might mean pursuing a dream she had put on hold, starting a new business, taking up a hobby she once abandoned, or deepening her spiritual journey. Because she is no longer caught in the endless loop of overextending, she now has time and energy to explore what truly lights her up. This expansion not only enriches her life, but also inspires those around her to honor their own needs and boundaries. It's important to recognize that this change is not about becoming distant, cold, or detached. It's about shifting from availability that is rooted in fear or obligation to availability that is rooted in choice and authenticity. A woman who is always available is often acting from a place of fear. Fear of rejection, fear of abandonment, fear of being seen as unkind. But when she grows into her strength, she realizes that real love and respect are not conditional on her availability. They are built on mutual understanding, reciprocity, and honor. This awareness transforms not only her life, but the dynamics of everyone around her. Her decision to stop being endlessly available also challenges societal norms. For centuries, women have been praised for their selflessness, their sacrifices, and their willingness to put others first. While care and compassion are beautiful qualities, they should not come at the expense of a woman's well-being. By stepping back, setting limits, and prioritizing her needs, she sends a powerful message: women's lives are not measured by how much they give away, but by how fully they live. This redefines strength and reshapes cultural expectations for future generations. Little girls watching her learn that it is not only acceptable, but also admirable to honor yourself. Ultimately, when a woman stops being available, everything changes because she is no longer living reactively. She is living intentionally. She is no longer waiting for others to validate her worth through constant demands. She validates herself by choosing what aligns with her values and what honors her energy. She no longer fears being less loved if she is less accessible, because she has discovered that the most powerful love is the one she gives to herself first. This shift changes the way she loves, the way she works, the way she dreams, and the way she exists in the world. It is not a small change, it is a revolution. So, when a woman chooses to no longer be endlessly available, she is not just saying no to others. She is saying yes to herself. That yes echoes in every corner of her life, turning exhaustion into energy, obligation into freedom, and fear into confidence. The transformation may start quietly, with a single choice, but its impact is loud, undeniable, and lasting. Everything changes because she finally does. Availability is often mistaken for love or loyalty, but in truth it can become a cycle of self-sacrifice that drains a woman of her vitality. When a woman stops making herself constantly accessible, the world around her begins to shift in remarkable ways. It is not just a change in her schedule, it is a change in how she is perceived, how she perceives herself, and how her relationships unfold. For years, she may have been the person who answered every late-night call, who showed up every time someone needed help, who rearranged her priorities so that others could be comfortable. At first, this feels noble, even rewarding. She may feel like she is being kind, dependable, and loving. But as time passes, she realizes that this availability is costing her more than she ever imagined. It is costing her peace, it is costing her balance, and most of all, it is costing her the recognition of her own worth. The act of always being available is often rooted in the need to be seen as valuable. Society teaches women that their worth is connected to how much they can give, how selfless they can be, and how indispensable they are to others. But the problem with being indispensable is that it often leads to being invisible. When people know that a woman will always be there, they stop truly noticing her. They stop appreciating her effort because her presence is guaranteed. Her sacrifices become background noise, expected rather than celebrated. But when she decides to step back and stop being constantly accessible, people notice her absence. And in that moment, they begin to understand the weight of her presence. Her time and energy become recognized as gifts instead of assumptions. For the woman herself, this is a profound awakening. She begins to realize that she does not need to be everywhere at once to be valuable. She does not need to answer every call to be loved. She does not need to say yes to every request to be worthy. The act of drawing boundaries reminds her that her existence is meaningful even when she is resting, even when she is unavailable, even when she chooses herself. That shift in mindset is liberating. Instead of measuring her worth by what she gives away, she begins to measure it by how aligned she feels with her choices. She starts to trust her own no as much as her yes, and she begins to live with a deeper sense of authenticity. This change also reshapes her relationships. People who once relied on her for everything begin to pause. Some may resist at first, questioning why she is no longer as available as before. But over time, those who truly value her learn to adapt. They begin to respect her boundaries, to schedule their needs instead of demanding her attention on a whim, and to give back to her as much as they take. On the other hand, those who only valued her for what she provided may fade away, revealing that their connection was conditional rather than genuine. Though it can be painful to lose people in this process, it is ultimately a gift, because it clears space for relationships that are rooted in mutual respect and balance. Stopping the cycle of constant accessibility also gives her the chance to invest in herself. When she is not answering everyone else's demands, she has time to pursue her passions. She might read the book she has always wanted to finish, sign up for the class she once put aside, or simply sit in silence and breathe deeply. These may seem like small acts, but they accumulate into a profound transformation. They remind her that she has a life outside of being useful to others, that her dreams matter, and that her growth is worth prioritizing. In this new space, she may rediscover her creativity, her voice, and her confidence. And as she grows, she brings more depth and richness into every aspect of her life. Another remarkable change occurs in how others perceive her. When she is always available, people may unintentionally take her for granted. They assume her yes before she even speaks. But when she steps back, her yes becomes valuable again. People begin to realize that her time is not infinite, and they start to appreciate her presence in a deeper way. They plan ahead, they express gratitude, and they no longer assume that she will bend herself endlessly to fit their needs. This shift elevates her in their eyes, not because she is harder to reach, but because her choices carry weight. There is also a quiet dignity in this new way of living. A woman who stops being constantly accessible no longer runs on urgency or obligation. She operates from intention. She chooses her commitments deliberately, which means she shows up with more energy and focus. Instead of spreading herself thin, she gives her best to the places and people that truly matter. That focus not only enriches her life, but also improves the quality of her relationships and contributions. People feel the difference between a woman who is stretched to her breaking point and a woman who shows up with her whole heart because she has chosen to be there. This decision also transforms her emotionally. Constant accessibility often leads to resentment, even if unspoken. A woman who is always available eventually feels taken advantage of, even if she doesn't admit it. She may grow frustrated at the imbalance in her relationships, but because she has not set boundaries, she continues to say yes. When she finally shifts this pattern, the resentment begins to dissolve. She no longer feels used because she no longer allows herself to be used. Her relationships become clearer, her emotions steadier, and her heart lighter. It is worth noting that this change is not about withholding love or care. It is not about shutting people out or becoming distant. It is about choosing balance over sacrifice, authenticity over obligation, and respect over depletion. A woman who stops being constantly accessible is still capable of deep love and compassion. Perhaps even more so, because she now has the energy to give freely rather than resentfully. Her boundaries make her love more intentional, her time more precious, and her presence more meaningful. On a broader scale, this choice has cultural significance. For generations, women have been praised for their availability, for being the mothers, wives, sisters, friends, and co-workers who never say no. This expectation has weighed heavily, leaving many women exhausted and unseen. When one woman decides to step back and honor her own boundaries, she sets a powerful example for others. She shows that love does not require self-erasure, and that respect begins with self-respect. Little by little, these choices challenge the narrative that women's value lies in their constant accessibility. Instead, they redefine value as authenticity, balance, and courage. In the end, when a woman stops being constantly accessible, she creates a new reality not only for herself, but also for everyone around her. She changes the way people see her, the way she sees herself, and the way her relationships function. She moves from a life of reaction to a life of intention. She learns that her worth is not dependent on how many people she pleases, but on how fully she honors her own truth. And that truth is powerful. It reshapes her life, it reshapes her connections, and it reshapes her future. Everything changes, but not because she stopped caring, but because she finally started caring for herself as much as she has always cared for others. There is a quiet revolution that begins when a woman stops being available on demand. This revolution is not loud, not boastful, and not about making dramatic declarations to the world. It begins in small, steady steps that come from within her heart and mind. It begins when she says no without guilt for the first time, when she allows a phone call to go unanswered because she needs rest, when she decides that her time and energy are worth protecting. These may seem like minor choices on the surface, but in reality, they mark the beginning of an extraordinary transformation. For the woman who has spent years sacrificing her own needs to remain endlessly available, these choices are acts of courage, and they initiate a ripple effect that alters her life in profound ways. The revolution starts with her redefining what love and care mean. For a long time, she may have believed that love was about self-sacrifice, about always being there, about never disappointing others. But when she steps back, she learns something powerful. True love is not about depleting yourself for others. True love is about being authentic, about showing up when you mean it, and about honoring your needs as much as you honor others. By creating boundaries, she is not reducing her capacity to love, she is deepening it. She no longer shows up resentfully or half-heartedly, but with presence and sincerity, because she has chosen it. Her yes is no longer automatic but intentional, and that makes it far more valuable. This shift also teaches others how to treat her. People learn through her actions what is acceptable and what is not. When she was always available, she unknowingly taught them that her time and energy were limitless resources. She trained them to expect her presence at every call, every crisis, every whim. But when she stops being on demand, she retrains them. She shows them that her availability is a privilege, not an entitlement. Some may resist, pushing back against these new boundaries, but over time, those who truly value her adjust. They learn to respect her time, to appreciate her presence, and to approach her with consideration instead of assumption. The revolution changes not only how she lives, but how people experience her. What makes this transformation revolutionary is that it challenges the invisible scripts that govern women's lives. For centuries, women have been praised for their willingness to sacrifice themselves for others. Stories of the selfless mother, the tireless wife, the endlessly giving daughter have been held up as ideals. But these stories, while inspiring on the surface, have trapped women in cycles of depletion. When a woman stops being endlessly available, she steps outside of that script. She writes her own narrative, one where her well-being matters, where her voice matters, and where her boundaries matter. This is not a rebellion against love or family or duty. It is a rebellion against erasure. It is a revolution of presence, of authenticity, and of truth. On a practical level, this revolution transforms her energy. A woman who has always been on demand knows what it feels like to live tired, to live stretched thin, to live with a sense of constant obligation. She is often exhausted, carrying the weight of everyone else's needs while neglecting her own. But when she begins to withdraw from constant accessibility, she finds that her energy begins to return. She has time to rest, to breathe, to dream, to create. She no longer runs on fumes, but on purpose. This renewed energy gives her the ability to show up more fully in the areas of her life that truly matter. She becomes more productive at work, more joyful in her relationships, and more present in her personal life, not because she is doing more, but because she is doing it from a place of balance rather than depletion. Another powerful aspect of this quiet revolution is that it frees her from fear. Many women stay constantly available because they fear the consequences of saying no. They fear rejection, abandonment, judgment, or conflict. But when she begins to set boundaries, she realizes that the world does not collapse when she says no. The people who love her do not disappear. And if some relationships do fall apart, she realizes they were never built on mutual respect in the first place. With each boundary she sets, her fear lessens and her courage grows. She discovers that her value is not tied to her availability, but to her authenticity. This realization gives her an unshakable strength. She no longer seeks validation through self-sacrifice because she has found validation within herself. The revolution also impacts her emotional landscape. Without boundaries, resentment often builds silently. A woman who is always on demand may smile and nod on the outside, but inside she feels unappreciated and drained. Over time, this resentment corrodes her joy and her sense of peace. When she begins to protect her availability, resentment fades. She feels lighter, freer and more content because her choices are her own. She no longer agrees out of obligation, but out of genuine desire. This alignment between her actions and her feelings creates harmony within her, and that harmony radiates outward. She becomes calmer, more confident, and more at peace. Not because her life is free of challenges, but because she has taken control of how she navigates them. This quiet revolution also redefines power. In many cultures, power has been defined in terms of dominance or control. But when a woman stops being endlessly available, she discovers a different kind of power, the power of self-respect. It is not about overpowering others, it is about standing firm in her truth. It is about knowing that she does not have to be everywhere, do everything, or please everyone to be valuable. This kind of power is subtle but transformative. It shifts how she carries herself, how she speaks, and how she makes decisions. Others can sense this shift, even if they cannot explain it. They begin to see her as someone who knows her worth, and that perception influences how they engage with her. Over time, this revolution ripples outward into every area of her life. At work, she may find that she is no longer the one who takes on every extra task or stays late just because others expect it. Instead, she focuses on what matters most and asserts her limits, which often leads to greater respect from colleagues. In friendships, she may notice that conversations become more balanced, with others making more effort to give as much as they take. In family life, she may inspire others, children, partners, siblings to also set healthy boundaries, creating a culture of respect rather than exploitation. The changes are subtle, but they accumulate into a life that feels more aligned, more authentic, and more fulfilling. What makes this process extraordinary is that it does not require dramatic external action. It is a revolution that happens quietly, choice by choice, boundary by boundary, moment by moment. It is not about proving a point to the world. It is about proving to herself that she matters. And when she believes that, everything around her begins to shift. Relationships realign, energy returns, opportunities open, and joy deepens. In the end, the quiet revolution of stopping endless availability is not about becoming less loving or less generous. It is about making love and generosity sustainable. It is about ensuring that her giving comes from a place of abundance rather than exhaustion. It is about honoring her humanity, her limitations, and her dreams. This revolution may not make headlines, but it changes lives, her own and those around her. Everything changes because she no longer operates from fear or obligation, but from truth, strength, and authenticity. That is the power of a woman who chooses boundaries. That is the revolution that begins the moment she decides to stop being available on demand. The act of no longer being constantly available is not about shutting people out. It is about self-respect. This is a truth many women discover only after years of exhausting themselves in the name of being dependable. A woman who is endlessly available often believes she is showing love, loyalty, or compassion. She tells herself that being there for everyone at all times proves her value. But deep down, she knows it comes at a cost. The cost of her own peace, her own growth, and her own sense of self. When she finally decides to set boundaries, to choose herself alongside others, and to protect her energy, she experiences a transformation that touches every part of her life. This shift may be misunderstood by those around her, but in reality, it is one of the most powerful expressions of courage and self-worth. At first, saying no feels foreign. It feels uncomfortable, even rebellious. A woman who has always been available is accustomed to measuring her goodness by her willingness to please. When she says no to a request, she fears being called selfish, cold, or uncaring. These fears come from years of conditioning. Society has praised women for their sacrifices while often punishing them for their boundaries. But the moment she begins to practice self-respect, she realizes that boundaries are not barriers to love. They are frameworks that make love more sustainable. They protect her from overextending, and they preserve her ability to give from a place of fullness rather than depletion. As she steps into this new way of living, her relationships begin to change. Some people will resist. They may be surprised or even upset that she is no longer as readily available as before. Friends who are used to her always saying yes may question her. Family members who relied on her to carry the emotional load may feel disappointed. Partners who benefited from her endless giving may push back. But over time, those who truly care about her adjust. They learn to appreciate her presence more, to respect her choices, and to stop taking her for granted. Meanwhile, those who cannot accept her boundaries reveal themselves. They fall away, leaving space for relationships that are rooted in genuine respect rather than convenience. Though painful, this process is cleansing. It realigns her life so that the people around her are those who honor her strength, not those who exploit her kindness. The shift also has profound effects on her inner world. When she was constantly available, she often lived with quiet resentment. She said yes when she wanted to say no. She answered the phone when she longed for silence. She attended gatherings out of obligation rather than joy. Over time, these small compromises created bitterness. She may not have voiced it, but she carried it within her, and it weighed her down. When she begins to set boundaries, that resentment begins to lift. For the first time, she feels aligned with her choices. When she says yes, it is because she truly wants to. When she says no, it is because she respects her limits. This alignment brings peace. It allows her to live authentically, without the inner conflict of pretending to give when she has nothing left. Another significant change is the way she views herself. Constant availability often sends a subconscious message that her time is less valuable than everyone else's. By always making room for others, she diminishes her own importance. But when she practices self-respect, she begins to see herself differently. She recognizes that her time is precious, her energy is sacred, and her presence is meaningful. She no longer views herself as someone who must bend endlessly to accommodate others. She begins to stand taller, to speak with more conviction, and to carry herself with quiet confidence. People notice this shift. They may not be able to name it, but they feel it. She is no longer defined by her availability, but by her authenticity. This transformation also teaches her that love cannot be measured by sacrifice alone. For too long, she may have believed that the more she gave, the more loved she would be. But the reality is, love that requires her to erase herself is not real love. Real love allows room for her boundaries. Real love thrives in mutual respect, not endless sacrifice. When she stops being constantly available, she gives herself the chance to experience deeper, healthier relationships. These connections are built on reciprocity, where both parties give and receive respect and honor, love and support. This shift elevates not only her relationships with others, but also her relationship with herself. From a broader perspective, her choice to stop being constantly available is radical because it challenges cultural expectations. Society often celebrates women for how much they can endure, how tirelessly they can give, and how selflessly they can sacrifice. While generosity is beautiful, it should not come at the cost of a woman's well-being. By setting boundaries, she challenges this narrative. She shows that it is possible to be compassionate without being depleted, to be supportive without being exploited, and to be loving without being endlessly available. Her choice becomes an example for others, friends, colleagues, even younger generations, who may have believed they had no right to boundaries. In this way, her personal act of self-respect becomes a collective ripple of empowerment. This shift also has practical effects on her daily life. By not being constantly available, she frees up time for things that nourish her. She can invest in her health, pursue her passions, deepen her spiritual practices, or simply rest without guilt. These acts of self-investment strengthen her, allowing her to show up in the world with more vitality. Rather than living in a cycle of exhaustion, she lives in a cycle of renewal. She has more energy for the people and projects that truly matter, which makes her contributions more meaningful. Her life becomes one of intention rather than obligation, and that intention brings a sense of fulfillment she may never have known before. The courage to step back from constant availability also frees her from the illusion of control. Many women stay endlessly accessible because they fear that saying no will cause relationships to unravel or people to leave. But when she finally lets go of that fear, she realizes something liberating: the right people will stay. Those who are meant to be in her life will respect her boundaries, and those who cannot respect them were never meant to remain. This realization allows her to live with less anxiety and more trust. She no longer feels the need to hold everyone together with her availability. She trusts that healthy relationships can stand on their own without her self-erasure. Ultimately, the decision to stop being constantly available is a declaration of self-respect. It is a statement that her life, her time, and her energy are valuable. It is a commitment to living authentically rather than living through obligation. It transforms her relationships, her sense of self, and her experience of love. Most importantly, it allows her to live a life that feels true to who she is, rather than a life dictated by the expectations of others. Everything changes because of this decision. She no longer measures her worth by how much she gives away. She measures it by how fully she honors herself. She no longer fears disappointing others because she knows that pleasing everyone is impossible and unnecessary. Instead, she focuses on living with integrity, choosing her commitments with care, and giving her energy where it truly belongs. This shift is not selfish, it is sacred. It is not rejection, it is respect. It is not the end of love. It is the beginning of deeper, truer love. So when a woman stops being constantly available, the world around her shifts. People begin to respect her more. She begins to respect herself more, and her relationships become healthier. Her life becomes lighter, freer, and more aligned with her truth. Everything changes because she finally understands that her availability does not define her value. Her self-respect does. When a woman stops being endlessly available, she begins to live on her own terms, and this simple but profound shift changes everything. For much of her life, she may have been trained to operate on everyone else's timetable. She answered the phone when it rang, no matter what she was doing. She agreed to favors, even when she was already stretched thin. She sacrificed her rest, her peace, and sometimes her dreams, in order to keep others comfortable. This pattern, often mistaken for kindness or love, eventually drains her spirit. But when she chooses to step away from that cycle, when she says, "I will not live according to everyone else's demands, I will live according to my own truth," she reclaims her power. That choice is not selfish, it is an act of courage, and it shifts not only her life, but also the way others experience her. The first transformation that takes place is within herself. Living on her own terms means she no longer acts out of obligation or guilt, but out of intention and authenticity. When she chooses to be present for someone, it is because she truly wants to, not because she feels forced. When she says yes, her yes carries weight and meaning. And when she says no, her no is a reflection of her self-respect. This clarity brings her peace. Instead of feeling torn between her own needs and the endless expectations of others, she feels aligned. Her actions match her values, her words match her feelings, and her life matches her truth. That kind of alignment creates a sense of freedom she may have never known before. As she begins to live on her own terms, her relationships evolve. Those around her notice the difference immediately. Some may resist, because they were comfortable with her endless availability. They may accuse her of changing, of being difficult, of becoming distant. But in reality, she is not withdrawing from love. She is redefining love. She is teaching others that her presence is valuable, not guaranteed. She is showing them that respect is non-negotiable. Over time, those who truly value her adapt. They stop expecting her to bend endlessly and start appreciating her choices. They plan ahead, they communicate more clearly, and they treat her with greater care. On the other hand, those who cannot handle her boundaries often fall away. Though it may feel like loss, it is actually liberation, because she is no longer weighed down by relationships that drain her. This shift also allows her to reclaim her energy. For years, her energy may have been scattered in 1,000 directions, toward friends in crisis, family obligations, work pressures, and social expectations. By the end of each day, she had little left for herself. But when she starts living on her own terms, she begins to prioritize her energy. She learns to rest without apology, to pursue activities that nourish her, and to give her attention to the people and projects that truly matter. This renewal brings vitality back into her life. She becomes more present, more joyful, and more focused, because she is no longer drained by obligations that were never hers to carry in the first place. Living on her own terms also empowers her to rediscover her dreams. Endless availability often forces women to put their goals on the back burner. She may have once wanted to travel, to study, to start a business, to write a book, or to create something beautiful. But those dreams were delayed because she was too busy taking care of everyone else. When she steps away from that cycle, she creates space for her aspirations. She remembers who she is outside of her roles as caretaker, supporter, or problem solver. She begins to pursue the passions that once made her feel alive. In doing so, she not only enriches her own life, but also inspires those around her. Her courage to chase her dreams gives others permission to do the same. One of the most powerful changes this shift brings is emotional freedom. When she was always available, she may have lived with quiet resentment. She said yes when she wanted to say no, and that created inner conflict. She smiled outwardly while feeling frustrated inwardly. Over time, this dissonance took a toll on her joy. But when she starts to prioritize her own needs, she feels lighter. She no longer carries the burden of obligation. She no longer gives from a place of depletion. Instead, she gives from a place of choice. Her emotions are clearer, her spirit is calmer, and her heart is freer. This emotional freedom allows her to experience relationships and life itself with greater depth and authenticity. It is also important to recognize that living on her own terms challenges long-standing cultural narratives. Women have long been celebrated for their selflessness, for their ability to endure, to give, and to sacrifice. While generosity is noble, it becomes destructive when it erases the woman herself. By choosing to stop being endlessly available, she challenges the notion that a woman's worth lies in her sacrifice. She proves that a woman's worth lies in her wholeness, in her authenticity, and in her courage to honor herself. This act of rebellion against outdated expectations creates a ripple effect. It not only changes her life but also sets an example for others, friends, daughters, sisters, and colleagues, who may feel trapped in the same cycle. Her choice becomes a spark that lights the path for others to follow. Practically speaking, living on her own terms transforms the rhythm of her daily life. Instead of constantly reacting to others' demands, she begins to plan her days around her own priorities. She no longer feels the anxiety of being pulled in every direction. She sets boundaries for her time, creates space for rest, and allows herself moments of solitude. This structure does not make her rigid. It makes her intentional. It allows her to show up fully for the commitments she does choose, while still protecting her peace. Her days begin to reflect balance rather than chaos, and her life begins to feel more like her own. Another profound impact of this shift is the way others perceive her. When she was always available, people may have unconsciously taken her for granted. They assumed her yes before she even spoke it. But when she begins to live on her own terms, her yes becomes precious again. People see her presence as a gift, not a guarantee. They recognize that her time has value, and that recognition elevates her in their eyes. She is no longer the person who can be called on at any time for any reason. She becomes someone whose presence is respected, appreciated, and honored. This change reshapes the dynamics of her relationships, making them healthier and more balanced. Most importantly, living on her own terms transforms how she sees herself. She no longer defines her worth by how much she can endure or how much she can give away. She defines her worth by her authenticity, her choices, and her integrity. She begins to trust herself more deeply. She learns to listen to her inner voice, to honor her limits, and to celebrate her strengths. This newfound self-trust creates an unshakable confidence. She no longer seeks validation through her availability, because she has discovered validation within herself. In the end, everything changes when a woman stops being endlessly available and starts living on her own terms. Her relationships become more genuine. Her energy returns, her dreams are revived, and her sense of self is restored. She no longer operates out of fear of rejection, fear of judgment, fear of losing love. Instead, she operates out of truth. She knows that real love will respect her boundaries. She knows that her life is too valuable to be spent constantly catering to others. And she knows that choosing herself is not selfish. It is necessary. This decision is not about rejecting others. It is about reclaiming herself. It is not about withholding love. It is about making love sustainable. It is not about closing doors. It is about opening the right ones. When a woman lives on her own terms, she transforms not only her own life, but also the lives of those who witness her courage. She becomes a living example of what it means to honor your worth, to protect your peace, and to embrace your truth. And in that transformation, everything changes because she has changed.